Look with me. This is a very familiar story that really appears in, three of the Gospels. Matthew and John also refer to this story. And so, but I'm going to use Mark's version this morning. So in Mark chapter 14, verse 3, it says, while he was in Bethany, reclining at the table in the home of Simon the leper, a woman came with an alabaster jar of very expensive perfume made of pure nard. Now, that doesn't sound very cool. Sharon says, hey, I just bought some new nard to wear. But that represented very expensive perfume. She broke the jar and poured the perfume on Jesus' head. Some of those present were saying indignantly to one another, why this waste of perfume? It could have been sold for more than a year's wages and the money given to the poor. And they rebuked her harshly. Leave her alone, Jesus said. Why are you bothering her? She has done a beautiful thing to me. The poor you will have always with you, and you can help them anytime you want, but you will not always have me. Now, church, I understand the ministry of the church is to feed the hungry. It's to clothe the naked. It's to provide encouragement. It's to minister to the poor. But get it straight this morning. The most important ministry the church has today is to worship at the feet of Jesus. The most important ministry that I have today is to be aware of the presence of God and to minister at His feet. It's to give God worship. It's to give God praise. It's to give God adoration. In fact, can we do that right now while we're sitting down? Can we lift up a shout of praise? Can we lift up a shout of worship? Yes. Because you say, Pastor, didn't we already do that? That's what we continually do. That is the pursuit of the believer. And this was a great moment. This was a relaxing moment. It was an occasion that people were invited to the house. And here they were lounging around the table. They were there to see one another. They were there to see Jesus. They were there for a time of fellowship, for a time of communion. And it was a wonderful opportunity. But all of a sudden, somebody walks into the room and says, hey, just being in the room with Jesus is not enough for me. I need to be at the feet of Jesus. And people, we need to be careful because sometimes we satisfy with being in the room with Jesus, but somebody needs to press through and say, I want to be at the feet of Jesus. I want to be where the Lord is. And all of a sudden, this woman comes into the room. And this is a very familiar story. And in the other Gospels, the woman is recognized as Mary. And Mary enters the room, and all of a sudden, hear me, Mary's not there for the food. Mary's not there for the fellowship. Mary's there to get to the feet of Jesus. And church, what would happen today? I love it when we come here on Sundays. I love celebrating and being with friends and being with family. I love coming in here and singing together and being together. But what would happen if we shifted our mindset and said, hey, as much as I want to see you, I want to be at the feet of Jesus. As much as I want to fellowship and enjoy this time of ministry, I've got to be at the feet of Jesus. And this woman comes into the room and she says, hey, listen, I love you, but I'm not here for you today. I love you, but hear me, I didn't come to worship you. I didn't come to praise you. I came to the one who saved me. I came for the one who redeemed me. I came for the one who delivered me. And she presses in. And all of a sudden, she does something that gets the attention of everybody else. She opens what she held in great value. The thing that she possessed, she broke it open in great value, and she poured it at the feet of Jesus. Now, all of a sudden, when the perfume began to pour, it got the attention of everybody else. And in that moment, it says people became indignant. Why is it when we get into the house of the Lord, we want to judge somebody else's worship? Why is it that we want to criticize the way somebody else is pursuing the presence of God? Hey, listen, they criticize me in my lifestyle. Let them criticize me in my worship. The problem is my worship isn't for you. I'm giving it to Him. My worship doesn't belong to you. I'm offering it to Him. And she pressed through the room and she came to the feet of Jesus. People always will say, hey, couldn't your time be better spent somewhere else? Couldn't your time be better spent? Because they don't see the value in my worship. Nobody will understand the value of your worship the way you do. Nobody knows what your worship cost you. Nobody knows how you got to this place. Nobody knows how you got to this position. And all of a sudden she comes in and she breaks the box and she begins to worship at the feet of Jesus. Listen, don't let anybody criticize and stop you from pouring out your worship on Him. And this is what's interesting about that broken box, about that broken jar. Because church, when things are broken, they just begin to gush out. When you break the box and break the jar, you can't control how it comes flooding out. Listen, it wasn't a jar you screwed the top off and you just dabbed a few drops on Jesus. Sometimes we want to come into church and we want to ration our worship. Well, I'm not in a really good mood today. I haven't had a very good week. I'm just going to give the Lord a little bit of worship. You're rationing your worship. But people, when you break the jar open, it comes flooding out, and you can't control how it comes out. When you get broken before the Lord, you'll cry in a way you've never cried before. When you get broken before the Lord, you'll shout in a way you've never shouted before. When you get broken before the Lord, it comes out in laughing and weeping and running and dancing. Oh, church, let's not be critical of people's worship. Let's not be critical of people's expression. Because she said, oh, I need to be at the feet of Jesus. And people will judge you. But Jesus said she'll be remembered forever. She said, as long as they're talking about this story, they'll remember her act. Let me tell you, some people can walk out of this service and it would just be another service. But if you get in the presence of the Lord today, this will be a service you'll remember for the rest of your life. That was the day I got my healing. That was the day my children got saved. That was the day I received. You'll remember this day for years to come when you get into the presence of Jesus. And it says she pushed in and she pursued the presence of the Lord. And let me tell you, church, the aroma began to fill the atmosphere. There was a shift and a change in the atmosphere. You couldn't see it. You couldn't understand it. You couldn't recognize it. But your senses begin to tell you something's different in the room. Something's different in this moment. And I've seen people when they've come into that church in that mindset. I don't know what they're dealing with. I don't know what they're going through. But their worship begins to shift the atmosphere. The worship begins to change the atmosphere. And people will sit back and look and say, I wonder what's going on over there. I wonder what they did wrong this week. I wonder while they're pouring out, what are they feeling so guilty about? And we begin to judge somebody else's worship. Oh, church, what if we all came in? If we all came in and pursued Jesus, hear me, our eyes would be on Jesus and not on one another. Our eyes would be on Him, and there would be this aroma that filled the atmosphere. See, there were multiple people in the room. And while some were in the room, Mary was at the feet of Jesus while others were across the room. See, it can happen in an environment like this, that some will get into the feet and the presence of Jesus, and some will be on the other side of the room and never encounter. Let me tell you what, you may not see it, but you'll feel it. You'll sense it. You'll smell it. You can't stop breathing. You can't stop smelling. And they all smelled the aroma. And Jesus said, don't rebuke her. She's doing a beautiful thing. The Lord called it a beautiful thing. Oh yeah, you think there's a better way to spend your time. You think there was a better way to spend the money. Hey, listen, the poor you'll have with you always. But he said, when my presence is here, you need to capitalize on that and move on that. Take advantage of the presence of the Lord. And listen, what others or Judas called a waste, Mary called worship. See, if you come here today and you don't get into the presence of God, then today is a waste of time. But if you come today and you find yourself at the feet of Jesus, then you'll experience worship and an encounter like you've never known before. So I began to pray this week and write some things down. I want us to experience the shift in the atmosphere. I want us to experience this shift. And how do you change the atmosphere? You change it through your worship. People, the worship shifts the sanctuary atmosphere. But your worship will always also change your home atmosphere. You can experience worship in your car. You can experience worship in your office. You can experience worship in your living room. Whenever you need a change in the atmosphere, just worship. Break the box and worship Him. Let me tell you, there are times that I get behind this pulpit and I feel inadequate for what I'm preaching about. I feel inadequate for what I'm sharing on because sometimes I'm going through things. But hear me, when I'm sick, I will still preach on healing. When I'm going through a battle, I will still preach on protection. When I'm going through struggles and difficulties, I will still preach on the deliverance of the Lord. And I realize this is an area in my life that I am still learning, I am still growing and understanding the power of creating an atmosphere for the presence of God. And listen to what they wrote in 2 Chronicles 5:13. It said, the trumpeters and the singers joined in unison, as with one voice, to give praise and thanks to the Lord. They were accompanied by the trumpets and the cymbals and other instruments. They raised their voices in praise to the Lord and saying, He is good, His love endures forever. Are you getting the picture? The voices and the instruments came together in one heart and one mind in unison, lifting up praises to the Lord. And then it says, the temple of the Lord was filled with a cloud, and the priests could not perform their service because of the cloud, for the glory of the Lord filled the house of God. Oh, church, when we come together in unity, when we have a heart and a voice that lifts up the presence of God, church, we will see the glory of the Lord fill this temple. We will see the glory of the Lord fill the house. We will see salvations. We will see deliverance. We will see healing, and it comes through worship. There is a heart of worship. There is a mindset of unity. There is a heart of brokenness that you can have in the presence of the Lord that affects His presence. It invites His presence, and it shifts the atmosphere. I'm ready to see what happens when Conroe first gets desperate for the presence of the Lord. The atmosphere I desire for Conroe first is an atmosphere of an open heaven, where we experience godly communion without spiritual limitations. Church, I want us to hear the voice of God speak, and we will see the hand of God move. God, open our eyes to what you are saying, and open our ears to what you are doing. And Scripture says, let him who has an ear hear what the Spirit is saying. Church, I want Conroe first to be an atmosphere of expectation. I never want it to be business as usual services. An atmosphere where anything is possible. Church, where the Spirit of the Lord is, there is freedom. The Spirit of God is allowed to move freely in this place. We don't have an agenda that controls the presence of God. We have an agenda that liberates the presence of God. There needs to be a freedom in the gifts of the Spirit to move and be in operation, where the Spirit of God is not quenched because we have something else we need to do. I want to create an atmosphere at Conroe first for the supernatural. Our God is not common or ordinary. He is an extraordinary and supernatural God. With God, all things are possible. Church, when faith is let loose and hope is lifted, God can and He will accomplish whatever He wants to do. My prayer has always been, God, surprise me. God, move in a way that we can't explain but by saying, but God. I want an atmosphere for all. Conroe First is a place where all are welcome and anyone can receive. Rahab was a prostitute, yet she's listed in Hebrews chapter 11 among those of great faith. Paul was converted from persecuting the church till he became a pillar of the church. David committed adultery and murder, and yet he's remembered for being a man after God's own heart. And Mary, that we talked about this morning, she was filled with demons, and now she's filled the house with worship. She's filled the house with praise. Remember, church, there is no limit to what God can do with a life that is fully committed and surrendered to Him. I pray that every person that walks into this sanctuary has a willingness to be transformed and used by God. God creating us an atmosphere of love and accepted. People are important, not buildings. God shed His blood for all people. The gospel is for everyone. Red and yellow, black and white. They are precious in His sight. Church, the church is open to all. It's not a private club for some. And so 1 Corinthians 13 says, if I have the gift of prophecy and can fathom all mysteries and all knowledge, and if I have faith that can move mountains, but do not have love, I am nothing. Oh Lord, let this be a house of love. I want an atmosphere of victory. Hear me this morning. Sin and sickness are defeated here, not people. Sin and sickness are defeated here, not people. God is able to deliver anyone of anything at any time. And we need to trust and believe God is our healer. God is our deliverer. He's our provider. He is the source of my salvation. I'm praying on Conroe First, an atmosphere of provisions and financial blessing. My God shall supply all your needs according to His riches and His glory. So I pray financial blessings to be released in your home and the bondage of debt to be broken. We trust God in obedience with our tithes and our offerings, and I pray that the windows of heaven are opened and an overflow in your life. I want this to be an atmosphere of peace. People, our future is in the hands of the Lord. The plans you have for us are plans to prosper us and not to harm us. His plans are to give you a hope and a future. People, we trust in providence, not in politicians. We trust in providence, the grace of the Lord, the mercy of the Lord, the hand of the Lord, not in the politicians. God is in control. Our hope and our confidence is in you. Thy will be done on earth as it is in heaven. Give us your vision today, Lord, for today and for tomorrow. Why? Because we walk by faith and not by sight. So our hearts are hopeful. We're believing for the impossible, and we're trusting God and standing on His promises. People, where I see imperfections, God sees all the possibilities. Chase, come join me up here this morning. And this morning, I want Conroe First to create an atmosphere of worship. Let the aroma of worship fill this sanctuary. Pursuing the presence of God is our greatest desire. My worship magnifies God in my life. It magnifies God in my crisis. It magnifies God in my healing and my home. I want to lift up my worship, and I want to let go of my worry. Let's all stand to our feet this morning.